please help me welcome your principal, Mr. Bolger.
All right. This is one of those you're going to have to give me some leeway here, right? Because I am up here, I am your principal, so be respectful. But ultimately, I'm really up here because I'm a writer. And so I'm going to kind of beg for to give me a little bit of room here, right? Because this is going to be really out there and a little weird. My childhood was bizarre. I grew up on a dairy farm. And so the title of the story that I wrote is called Blood and Chocolate. I grew up on a dairy farm in the 1970s and 80s. Out in the country, folks opened up their windows at night in the summer in order to let in the breeze. You could hear so many sounds at night. Insects, millions and millions of them, night birds, coyotes, storms off in the distance, and wind, perpetual, never-ending wind. And traffic, occasionally. We didn't get a ton of traffic by our house, but we did live on a road that had a pretty high miles per hour, a 50-mile-an-hour limit. We had cows. We had about 100 of them, give or take. Most nights growing up were pretty much the same, but not all of them were. Some nights growing up on the farm when I was a kid were as crazy as blood and chocolate. My friend John Wiedemann was staying overnight. We were about 12 years old, which is around that weird time when boys sleep in the same bed, but they talk about girls. A strange sort of in-between time, half little boys and half men to be. John Wiedemann was my best friend at that time. It was just before his parents moved him to Florida, curse them. John could turn on a wiffle ball like a whipsaw and hit it further than anyone else in the 6th grade. I was in awe of him. He also had feet that smelled like old rubber and days-old roadkill. When it happened, the night was shattered like a million shards of breaking glass. It was impossible to know exactly what was making these sounds. There was screeching of tires, an incredibly loud explosion of some sort, screaming, scraping sounds of heavy metal, and sounds of breaking metal and glass. It lasted seconds, blowing us out of bed. But somehow it seemed like it went on and on and on. It was though time was frozen, paralyzed even. I remember waking up to this terrifying sound and trying to get my bearings. John Wiedemann doing the same thing. We were trembling, afraid to move in the deafening silence that followed this colossal sound. My mother was gone at the time. She was visiting friends out of town. My dad was up in his room moving around. I remember John and I getting up and fumbling around in the dark for a while, trying to find matching shoes, socks, and our clothes. It never even dawned on us to turn on the light. I'm not sure why. Neither of us spoke. We were too scared or too confused or both. With my mother gone, my father seemed perfectly at ease when John and I emerged from my room to join him in the hallway. My father mumbled something like, "accident of some sort." But that was it. And he made his way down the creaky staircase of our 120-year-old home. John and I followed. Outside, when we got there, it was damp and misty and chilly, but there was a bright moon shining, and then after a few minutes that you were out there and your eyes adjusted, it seemed almost like an eerie daylight, like a dream come alive. Down the road, we could see an enormous object, a truck, laying on its side across the width of the road. We began walking towards it like zombies, like drawn like magnets, my father in the lead. As we got nearer to the scene, not saying a word, we became aware of hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of objects littering the road. None of us bent over to pick one up until my father, a Hershey's bar. Millions of them, millions and millions and millions and millions all over the road. And when we even got closer, we could see it. Yet, in its own surreal way, we couldn't see this scene, couldn't see it at all. All we could see in our 12-year-old brains at that time was blood and chocolate everywhere. A massive brown delivery truck on its side slung across a 2-lane highway. The smell of burnt and too hot things of engine and fuel and oil and rubber and radiator fluid and chocolate bars, boxes and boxes and boxes of them, flung open, scattered everywhere. So much chocolate you could live 100 lifetimes and not touch it. And then the blood part. My father was a man of very few words, telling us to stay back, to turn back, head back to the house, go back to the house. Of course, we didn't listen. We were 12. John and I kept coming, and what we saw. I remember John taking really short breaths now, talking to me really quickly. I cannot remember what he was saying. He was talking millions and millions and millions of words a minute, describing every detail to me, jibber-jabbering, jibber-jabbering, jibber-jabbering. I remember it like a sequence of photographs. Windshield smashed, blood streaked across the inside and outside, a man's arm bent at the wrong angle, sticking out from under the cab of the truck, blue fingers, broken nails. My father climbing into the cab of the truck through the smashed front windshield, parts of a cow on the road, only parts. On the front of the truck, more parts. Under the truck, cow parts. In the ditch, cow parts. A head here, a hoof over here, and blood. So much blood, cow and human, all mixed up, and chocolate, smeared and mixed and melting and everywhere. I remember only bits and pieces after that. My dad forgetting about me and forgetting about John and him running back to the house to call the police. And John and I were picking up chocolate bars, putting them in our pockets, stuffing them in our pants pockets, stuffing them down our shirts. Police cars, sirens moaning from what seemed like 100 miles away, then louder and louder and closer, seeing red and blue lights to the point we were blinded by it. And now, whenever I see a Hershey's bar, I'm always taken back to that night in 1979 when my friend John Wiedemann and I were awakened by a screaming, nonsensical catastrophe and stumbled into a mind-altering scene of blood and chocolate unveiled in an evening of mist and moonlight on a country road. And that is my childhood. And I thank you for your time.